Welcome to Responsibility for Freedom with Luke. I got my regular guest on today, Chris Hampton, with us, and we're going to be talking about some things that are going on in the world that we think are really important, that we need to pay attention to, because again, the whole reason for freedom is for us to have a better life for ourselves, for our kids, and there's only so certain ways you can have that. You have to have a strong country with strong borders, and you only let people in who have the same ideals as you. And if you don't do those things, then you're forever going to be fighting. And I don't think we should be pursuing this idealistic utopia at the expense of ideas that don't work. For instance, the experiment that's been going on for the last solid 15 years in the UK and attempting to be done here in North America is the wholesale importation of immigrants with no skills, can't speak the language, for whatever reason that is being perpetrated upon us in the media, that they're asylum seekers and they're fleeing war-torn areas. That's all BS. That's all BS. This is a social experiment at the expense of what we could consider one of the safest societies that we've been able to build since recorded history. And it's being destroyed from within. And specifically, I think the canary in the coal mine, I think, is Tommy Robinson, because for over a decade, he's been talking about what's happened to his hometown in Luton. And if you take what happens in one community because of these ideas being implemented, there's no way it's not going to happen in the entire country. And Tommy Robinson, if anybody doesn't know, you can look it up. Basically, in his hometown in Luton, he had he saw his community that he grew up in changing, specifically Muslim immigrations coming in, and then they were overtaking homes, and now it's to the point where you can't even buy a home in Luton. It's all rental. But that didn't happen overnight. He started to see the change in his community, and he started to talk about it, he started to warn about it. It's to the point where there's nobody living there but Muslims. They virtually all left. And the grooming gangs that are going on, the rape that's been going on, the cover-up and the political correct government establishment that has now protecting these immigrants at the expense of their own countrymen and women. It's actually horrifying. And it's okay for the elite because they live in these gated, upper class, middle, far away, all white neighborhoods. And they act like nothing's happening at the expense of, like I said, their countrymen and fellow countrywomen. And so how bad is it? Well, Tommy Robinson would report on these events, and specifically, he was reporting on the grooming gang trials that were going on. And apparently, he was charged and convicted a few months ago for contempt of court. Now, contempt of court, usually, it's rare in and of itself, and it carries a fine in most cases, and it's really hard to enforce, and it's rarely done. I've been charged with contempt of court, and it's usually specific to an order going on with your case. For instance, the court could implement a gag order upon you. You can't talk about this case. And if they found out you were talking to a reporter or someone else, they'll haul you back in front of the judge and say you were in contempt of court of an order. Well, Tommy Robinson was charged, convicted, and sentenced to 13 months for contempt of court, while publicly filming on a public street, reading a BBC report of this trial going on. So for all intents and purposes, it doesn't look like there was any violation of contempt of court, but we can't really say for sure because we were never told, or the public was never told, and neither was Tommy told, or his defense team told at the time when he was arrested, what the specific allegation of the contempt of court was. He pled nothing, no charge, thinking that would give him leniency. Couldn't even prepare his own legal team, and they convicted him and sent him to jail within 5 hours. That's what happens in kangaroo court, banana republic, Gestapo tactic garbage. That's what we expect in third world shithole countries. Not in freaking Britain. To one of their own citizens who's reporting on gang rapes of these people. This is going on. So, then you think there's a ray of hope. So after 2 years in solitary confinement, 2 months, where he lost 40 pounds because he only can eat a can of tuna a day and a piece of fruit, because the food that was prepared for him was prepared by the Muslim prison population, which was 70% Muslim. He couldn't open his window because they would throw feces and urine through his window. And then the guards would allow them to walk right up to his jail cell, open the slider, and because he was under solitary confinement, and give him death threats literally every day, that they would throw acid in his wife's face and his children. This went on every day. If you don't think that's mental abuse, then you're delusional, and you know, I have no respect for you. Some of the people in Britain were saying, oh, Tommy should be in jail. For what? They call him a racist. He's never said anything racist. When you point out a fact and say, look, this is changing our country, this is not good for our country, and then he receives death threats by those people, I think maybe we should listen to him. So he couldn't trust the food being prepared because they gave him a plate of food, and then they say, how's your food? And then he realized, I can't eat that. So that's why he was eating a can of tuna. Now he made an application to the prison to get more food. That was denied. If that's not torture and abuse, I don't know what is. He gets out of prison. If anybody looks at his arrest, his live stream arrest when he went in, and 2 months later when he comes out, it's apparent to anyone with two eyes that man has suffered some serious trauma. And now they're trying, the highest court, the highest judge in the land, three judges sitting on a panel. It took them 2 weeks to make this, but they ordered his immediate release from prison and basically in writing said that what happened to him was just an abuse of power, 7 ways to Sunday, and they made no qualms about it. There was no loophole or wiggle room there. And that should have been the end of it. But now they're September 4th, I believe. He's got to go back for the same charges by the same judge for the same contempt of court. So this is one individual who's standing up against what's going on in his country. And I'm going to tell you, it happens to anybody who stands up. The government, for their politically correct bias, protect these perceived minorities who are violent, who are organized, and who are committed to a global takeover of entire societies for their own way of life, to the detriment of their own people. There's so many people in their own culture who want out, but they can't get out because they're under threat of death. So we got to give them a safe haven. And if we wholesale import those people with these stupid ideas and let them set up their religious recruitment centers, there's not, the people who want out of that are never going to have a safe haven to go to. Where's it going to be one? And what's going to happen to the rest of us? So that's my take on the Tommy Robinson situation. I think it's horrendous. Oh, you could go to his Tommy Robinson on the Rebel Media. They have a Patreon for his legal fee. I've contributed to it, and I suggest that you do as well. We'll put a link down in our description. So I'm here with Chris Hampton today, the co-author that we wrote the Freedom Handbook together to make the world a better place. Chris, I know you've been following this for quite some time. What do you have to add to that?
Well, goodness, Luke. Yeah, I mean, following it for quite some time. Boy, we've been working for 6 years. We have some a lot of really great information to share with you. And, I hope you appreciate our conversation. And I'm, I was thinking about, what a great job Luke was doing of explaining for a layman, somebody who doesn't know, but I'm going to assume in some cases and talk a little bit about some things really quickly that, I assume a lot of people do know. About really quickly. But first, with respect to Tommy, I mean, never mind if we watched that man rise from the beginning, together. And, I mean, the topic of heroes, we have some interesting, things going on. And, even the hip, I've got a great video on a personal channel coming up about the hip, a Canadian rock band heroes, But who is it that are your heroes? Who do you admire? I admire Tommy Robinson. And there are a lot of people who do. The entire world is split. I don't know what the split is, but I would say most people who would encounter his idea, who come from a Western background, would probably like him. And I thought before he got arrested that the world was coming around, and that you heard a lot of that, not just from Tommy, but from the world, that, he would travel around, and people that used to call him a racist and a Nazi and so on had kind of understood that, no, he wasn't a thing that the media had called him. He's just a guy. He's a guy with friends of every color and creed, like us Canadians. Grew up with, playing sports and stuff with, my two turban wearing best friends amongst the group of us. And none of that stuff matters. We always know that it's like Martin Luther King said, we judge the individual by the nature of their character. That's a long established tradition in Western societies that, you know, there's racist people, but they're a minority and we shun that publicly. They feel guilty for doing that publicly. That's why they do it privately. That's why you don't hear that on the street very often, because even they know it's not acceptable, even if they want to hold that view. And they'll generally respect society and do it privately. But Tommy, boy, it's really sad. Like Luke said, I want to hone in on the difference between the way that man was when he went in just this last time. I mean, they've tried to kill him and attack him and threatened his family and shut up. How many times, how many turning points, how many sleepless nights or crises that man has faced at the hands of just trying to tell the honest tale of his town and his struggle and his, that is, as you say, whether it's the people being raped, killed. There's a couple of memes and some information that we're going to share. Luke's already talked about some great links that we'll put below. One quick mention, you know, Luke's talking about the migrant influence, but one let's, you know, one meme that we'll put up there, and then maybe I was thinking I could try it right here in the video, Luke. Why don't I share this screen and tell me if, okay, so this is,
That's the Katie Hopkins thing.
right. This is the Katie Hopkins video that Luke sent me this week by the Rebel
And
Media.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah, we're going to
on
talk
the
about
9th,
that.
you know, and we are going to talk about that in a second. But first, what I wanted to show us is this meme here. The path of Islam is always the same. And I wanted to quickly reference, oopsie, I hit the wrong browser. That'll open up in a second. But I wanted to quickly pull up this other video for everybody, the one that I sent you here. I'm just pulling it up, sorry for that. This one here. Testing tolerance, Swedes, RT News.
Sweden, deadly violence at highest level since records began.
We want Sweden to be a Swedish country, and we want a lot of the people who live here now to go back.
Okay, so great video, 49 minutes, and published on the 29th of June. So I tell you what, I was surprised at the honesty of this documentary, talking about how literally, again, they're facing with this meme. They understand that this population, as you said, they come in, and it might be difficult to read. I'll see if I can zoom in and make that a bit easier. Maybe that's easier to read now. Establish a mosque. Number 2, create an enclave. And that's what these no-go zones are. The police won't go. The people won't go. The people themselves, the Islamists themselves say this is our place, our rules. We'd love to institute Sharia. That's our plan. And secondly, of course, anybody leaving, the ex-Muslims will tell you themselves the biggest problem, just like it says in the RT video later, that you'll hear this poignant quote from this ex-Muslim who's converted to Christianity, this Swede, saying, look, the biggest problem is that you've got a country inside a country. Like, and that wasn't the perfect, the exact word, but it's a community with its own rules, its own, that's what an enclave, grow the population, as you say, claim victimhood, resist the host authorities and customs, exploit the lawfare, which is exactly what's been going on. All of those things. Institute Sharia is already happened in, of course, these neighborhoods all over the place. Secede. Now that's the last piece we're at now. We've come all the way to 7, where they practice Sharia law in these communities. And if you don't think 2,000 acid attacks and rapes of millions of girls all throughout Europe isn't the institution of Sharia law and behavior, It's as this same Muslim will tell you, it's the imams in control in these neighborhoods, not the local authorities. They make the rules, societies, customs, and the people will tell you over and over and over again, the Swedes, the people and Europeans, they come here and they live just like they left in Africa. If they wanted to escape a better life and they want to make something new and assimilate to the culture here, then that's one thing. But when they come and they live like they lived there, and those customs and that ideology is totally opposite of our Western values. They kill gays, they kill women, they stone people in the street, they murder, they rape, they gang rape, they do all these things every day in the street to each other, and that's normal and okay, and it's horrific to us, and they're doing it to us. And so that's the plan, and I think that those two videos are worth a watch. And I mean, that's my quick 2 cents. We have lots of other things to kind of tie this together and have a fun show together. Luke and I have some big work and I think some great news. Listen, all you Q fans or Q haters, is that a crazy conspiracy? We say it doesn't matter. You'll notice here with Luke and I, we don't necessarily take a left position or right position. We hone in on, I think, core principles and values, a lot like, maybe Stefan Molyneux talks about in some ways. But I think in our own unique way, do a good job here. And we got some powerful messages for you, whether you like Q stuff, you believe it, or you don't, and you think it's crazy. There is a ton of stuff that we're going to talk about in a little later that is going to blow your mind. But back to this immigration problem, and the government, like you say, who's doing what for what ends? Well, listen. And look, by the way, back to this Katie Hopkins, I'll throw it over to you, Luke. I wanted to point out something that I don't know if you noticed at the beginning of that Katie Hopkins video. I had it showed up on the screen when I quickly moved. Look at that logo. Ooh. Well, it's Satanists, right? Whether we call them Hivites, whether we call them Illuminati, whether we call it the deep state, state of the Russians, the this, the that, the good people, bad. What's going on here? What is this fight? What are the troubles that we face? Who's creating this problem with migration? Who's creating the wars in the world? Who's creating the problems with the economy? Who's creating these political issues? Is the solution cultural? Is it political? Well, listen, we got some great stuff to talk about in a second with respect to those solutions, these big ideas, the problems. I want to throw it back over to you, Luke, because I'm looking at this, and you know what I think of? Like I say, back to the high-level thinking and connective generalist approach to these things after our lifetimes working at it. I tell you what, folks, think about Alex Jones. Think about what's going on. Crackdown on Hollywood, cleaning of the deep state, cleaning of the swamp globally. We got open Satanism. Symbolism will be their downfall. Big main, big part of it. Here's some satanic symbolism. Alex Jones, what's the best way to control the opposition? Be the leader. Alex Jones is the leader. CIA and blah, blah, blah. And is Alex Jones that comedian of old? What's the name? I forget again. Do you remember the name?
George Carlin?
No. Alex Jones couldn't be George Carlin. George Carlin's old. Alex Jones is accused of being a comedian who apparently died.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were trying to.
That young guy. So anyway, Alex Jones is on the ropes. Same way Weinstein is on the ropes, in my opinion. Okay?
Well,
because it's
okay,
out.
yeah.
And we know he's
here's
out. And he's probably got an ankle bracelet the same way Hillary did. And now Katie Hopkins has got horns in her video, and I think she's paid opposition too.
Well, the thing is, if we don't focus on the solutions, okay, and the solutions actually, you could turn this all around and you could do it really, really quickly. It's really simple. And talking about Katie Hopkins, she did a whole segment talking about that it's too easy to get acid, because she was referring to all the acid attacks that are going on, and acting like getting your hands on the acid's the problem. Oh, it's so simple. They're trying to listen. Now you're just chasing your tail around. It's this stupidity. People with bad ideas who commit stupid shit are going to do so, and you're never going to stop them. I mean, they drive trucks into crowds of people. They get knives. They do whatever they can to cause mayhem and destruction. And if people are intent on mayhem and destruction, you're not going to prevent it by taking away the tools. Now, these acid attacks are horrific. They're horrific. And the fact that they're happening at all, and that the government isn't treating this like an actual hostile invasion and going after these people like nobody's business. That's pathetic. They just did an acid attack. The reason why she did this, they threw acid on a 3-year-old and they had to amputate his leg. And he's blind in one eye because acid's horrendous. It went right into his bone. If you get it on you, if you don't neutralize it with like vinegar, because if you pour water on it, it makes it worse. And what are you going to do? Where are you going to get vinegar, water? You're in a panic situation. You can't even feel it melting off your face. It's a horrible situation. The fact that groups of people do this, it has to be dealt with in a proper way. I mean, what did society do when the mafia publicly shoot people in the street? Even though they're shooting themselves, the people have an outcry. They say, hey, listen, we don't want to live in a city where people are shooting themselves up. And the police go in, they sit down with the leaders of these gangs and go, look, it's not like we're not going to keep coming after you, but you guys can't be doing this. So there has to be, and even the mafia had a decency to say, okay, all right, I'm going to tone this crap down. And for the most part, the mafia, they don't want mayhem in the streets. They want to make their money. They don't want to cause that kind of stuff. Well, you're dealing with a group of people who don't give a crap. They don't give a crap about their own people. They don't give a crap about half their citizens, women. They treat them like subjugated slaves. And anybody who says otherwise is a delusional fool. A complete delusional fool. So Katie Hopkins is out there whining and complaining about the acid that people can get their hands on. That's ridiculous. That's not going to solve the problem. It's a waste. It's a distraction. It's a waste of time. And you mentioned Alex Jones, and I think this is important. If anybody doesn't know, he had his a decade, over 10 years of material removed from Facebook, YouTube. What was the other one? Twitter is still active, but he's been taken off Apple, and Google has ghosted him, is the term. So here's a person who was saying things. He had, some radical ideas that many of them turned out to be true. He would talk about conspiracy theories, have experts on his show. They said that he was spewing hate speech. When someone says to you that someone is saying hate speech, that person's a liar and a hypocrite and a buffoon. There's no such thing as hate speech. If you believe somebody is inciting violence and is a danger to the public, then it's going to be easily identifiable what that person is saying, what they are doing, and their actions would bear that out. But when somebody runs around and uses this new word, hate speech, it's garbage. It's the same thing as when someone says there's weapons of mass destruction over there. You instantly know there is no weapon of mass destruction, because if there was, they would tell you the name of it. They'd tell you what the serial number was, and they tell you what it was capable of. That vague statement means nothing. We got to wake up. You can't keep living life like a fool. But the good news, okay, let's talk about the good news. How do we solve this? You could end corruption in government anywhere on the planet the minute there's transparency. Ask yourself, how is it Nancy Pelosi and Maxine Waters live in $1 million mansions when the highest salary they ever had was, I think, $150,000 a year or $200,000 at the most? You tell me, right? I think we should do a forensic. They got that Paul Manafort trying to put him in jail for 300 years because they say he lied on a loan application to get a loan, which he paid back. So he didn't even commit fraud. I mean, even if you lied on an application to get a loan, but you paid the loan back, where's the fraud?
You need a victim. Party? You need a harm, as is often the case.
Yes. The government should not be using its laws and rules to victimize people who didn't do any harm to someone else.
I got a traffic ticket this week.
Oh, God. Here we go.
Listen. It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. You'll love it. So I was driving my friend's car, and they said they came to my house for a visit. They go, hey, good news, bad news. And I give me the bad. And you go, well, look, they showed me this ticket when I used their car, and I was driving through this city. And I'm like, and I didn't understand what the ticket was for, what I'd done wrong. And they're like, oh, it's really complicated. It's like, it's one of those things where like you almost have to know, you got to be a local. It's like at every certain times, like you're driving in a place that you're allowed to drive in, but in certain hours, only the buses and the whatever can be, but it's really hard to tell. It's in a very central, main, congested, and it's just one of those extortive grabs that they just put it there to catch people, you know, and grab cash. And I was like, oh, well, can you point it out on Google Maps and show me and tell me how to avoid it so I don't get caught again? Because I had no clue and how to even avoid that. You know, they're like, oh, it's really tough to avoid that one. It's almost a shame. And well, it was it's a bloody shame. So listen, the problems in the world, where are they coming from? How do we solve them real easy? Well, you know, like the state is I think I heard Stefan Molyneux said it this week so well, you know, in an interview when asked about his political opinions, you know, and he's like, well, you know, I'm not really, you know, like I think statism is wrong. You know, I'm a philosophy, first principles, non-aggression. It violates it. You know, it gives people superhuman powers that we would never give a human being. It's an old idea. It's a very bad idea that we need to outgrow. And that's the truth of it. We need to grow up and grow through that. And I don't think we can do that tomorrow. You know, back to things we've talked about before with Larkin Rose and the debate he had with Lawrence Southern. We can't, you know, fire the government tomorrow from everything. That would be pandemonium. But we could give, 6 months notice to people, for example, that certain things are going to happen and that they've got to get their act together, go start a business, whatever, blah, blah, blah. There's different things that can be had, and certainly the government can be shrunk. Now, if we know that the government nefarious ends, period, the deep state, the powers that be, the evil in the world, what's the biggest enemy? Where's the problems? Those are the problems, really. The state is their biggest weapon, right? That has that control like kings and emperors and all that stuff, and it's just not right. We know that. We can't give any. If human beings are trustworthy, then we don't need a government, and if they're not trustworthy, then a government is a very bad idea. Think about it. Okay.
And I want to tell people a story. I'm not going to get into tons of detail, but if you're wondering, well, what do we know about the state and what do we know about hidden agendas in court, I'm going to tell our viewers here something. I went to court for a traffic stop. Okay, I was charged with, I had a pocket knife on me, so they gave me 8 charges twice. So I had like 19 charges, and it all stemmed from obstruction of a peace officer. Okay, and I had a pocket knife, which is totally allowed you're allowed to have a pocket knife. And so they gave me all these weapons charges. I went to court. You know, you go to court for your hearing, you know, you ask for discovery, all that process. So I never had a lawyer until the very, very end, where I was basically subjugated into suing for peace at the very end. But I was arrested in the courtroom 7 times for failure to appear. Now, I want you to think about that. I was in the courtroom, but they charged me 7 times for not being there, which is a separate charge on top of all the other charges. So I had to keep going back. Now, all those charges were dropped except for the obstruction of the peace officer. And that's when I got a lawyer, because I didn't know how to stop the cycle of going to court, saying what I said, and ending up in jail for not being there, which confused everyone, including because you get to see a justice of the peace to see if you can get bail. And they were saying that I wasn't there. And then I said, well, where was I arrested? So and then we could go into detail, but basically, trust me, I know what the system is built on, fabricated on. It's a commercial transaction. And that's a whole nother system that, trust me, you have no idea about. And if you look at these sovereign citizens in the US and you think they're a bunch of wackos, you can watch videos, what they say to the police officer when they get pulled over. Everything they say is true, without question. But the police officer doesn't know any better. He doesn't care. He's identified, so he'll tow their vehicle, even though he has no lawful authority to do so. But those systems that are impressed upon us that we have no control over, there's ways to work within that system and be relatively free, right? But when that system is used against you because you expose it, or it's being used against you when you're exposing ideas that are being imposed upon you, such as this immigration issue, then it becomes exponentially dangerous, because if this continues, like I said, there's going to be no safe place for you to be. It's either going to be convert or die. And I don't think we want to be put in that position. And most of us haven't never lived in that position. So that's not where we want to be. And so we want to be in a better world. And I think if you look at the queue, it doesn't, like Chris says, it doesn't matter if you believe them or not, but look what's being said. You should judge people by their actions, not their words. And Q has exposed things. For instance, the FBI has shut down back pages, has shut down the personal ads on Craigslist. And these were used for human trafficking and sex trafficking of underage girls. Now, you may not know that, but that's what was going on. And the FBI, under the Trump administration, has closed this down and has made, if you look on the White House website, you can see there that their sex trafficking is one of their major things that they're going to work on. And if you look at the Q announcements, he talks about sex trafficking, pedophilia, and he's starting to expose these people, which is why Weinstein's been doing what he's been doing for decades. Why now? Think about it. That fat old piece of crap has been doing that his whole life. Why is he being outed today? Because there's a change coming. And he's the tip of the iceberg. There's wackos all over Hollywood. In fact, if you're in Hollywood, you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who wasn't a degenerate.
Well, I think that quote I shared with you earlier from Macaulay Culkin on Joe Rogan, you guys can check this out. Maybe I'll link it if I get a chance. Either way, it's easy to find. Macaulay Culkin says on Joe Rogan, I'm happy to be, I'm happy to be alive and have what I've got going on. I'm generally pretty content. He goes, horrible things happen to children all over the world every day. And at least I have a career and this life and this, out of it. And Joe Rogan's response is like, that's a very strange thing to say about your career and your life and how you got there. And he's and your movie career. And he's like, whatever, you can go on and check it out. But okay, so whether you believe Q or not, whether you believe that the world is run by satanic, cannibalistic pedophiles or not, the reality of the amount of pedophilia, even sexual abuse, just straight up normal men against women and women against men, sexual abuse is rampant, as we know, in the world, in certain circles at elite levels. And because they're just operating on a different scale where they're unchecked. The Clinton body bag, the blah. People can get away with murder, literally, obviously, lots of other things. The state kills more people than even the war. They kill more of their own citizens. The biggest killer of people on the planet all throughout history, not a war, not a dictator, but the country's killing their own people in that sense. It's not a conflict with somebody else. So, coming back to the solutions in Q, I want to share two memes on the screen here right now again. And I'm sorry for doing a screen share a little too long lately. I just replaced that with some memes instead of your face, Luke. But while you started talking there, I'll have to do that. So here's a quick summary, but the greatest military operation intelligence in world history. I thought that was a great title for this meme and a really poignant issue. And you look, QAnon, with the anons in the world voice is an idea. Luke and I have some good news, some fantastic news. And here's the punchline. Everything's changing. It's unstoppable. It's not you, it's not me, it's not any. It's the evolution of this thing that's humanity and this amazing thing, whatever it is, life, all of us. It's astounding. But we all have a role to play, and that's certainly the case. And, the biggest plus, I think, this world voice, what this is humanity rising in relative unity around principles that dissolve problems. So that sounds pretty simple. That's how we define it. World voice. Humanity works together, solves problems. But you know what? This new information revolution, the Aquarian age, whatever, Luke and I have been studying it forever. We've got lots and lots and lots of gold here for everybody. So listen up. Think about this. Wikipedia, first time world voice, some ways in the internet age, stands up in the tip of this information age, exploding. I mean, maybe it started with radio and TV, but let's skip forward and go Wikipedia. That's a big lesson. That's world voice that did that. The next big lesson is SOPA and PIPA at the hands of Aaron Swartz, another hero, and anybody in the world who gave a damn. In less than 24 hours, reversed the Senate in the U.S. and canceled those bills. Wow. Huge. Not a corporate lesson, a political lesson. That was world voice growing in complexity. Then you'd see it rise in the last maybe 5 years or so through the new media, routing around censorship and treating it like the malfunction it is. And look at the way the world is working together, like you say. Whether we believe in Q, whether we don't believe in Q, what we see is the world working together. Anonymous people, Reddit's people, 4chan people, 8chan people, dark web people, hackers, good people with internet skills and computer skills everywhere coming together in an ever more complex way through a blend of private institution, open source, decentralized programs, and doing what? All these social, even using the enemy's own tools like their social programs and software tools and so on, and leveraging those and getting the job done in lots of ways, doing lots of good work in the world. As we know, the internet has solved a lot of problems. It does so in an increasingly better, that's us working together. So the information revolution actually does three things. World Voice is three things, folks. Think about this very clearly. It's not just information being unleashed, truly, uncensored, unstoppable, but it is also our collaborative efforts and our creative efforts. Because you used to have $1 million or know somebody with it to get your stories published, fiction or not, ideas, inventions. Now we can create, we know. The barriers are gone. The barriers are gone for creation. The barriers are gone for collaboration. And those are the two keys. When you add that holy trinity together, that's World Voice. Now, QAnon is the next evolution beyond the new media. That's working together in a more sophisticated sense. And Luke and I, this is where you better buckle up, folks. Luke, I'm going to turn this over to you in a second and get you to tell them about the first two ideas that we've got for you folks. Two platforms. Now listen, remember what I just talked about. We are not trying to become the new corporate Google overlords. But I'm going to give you solutions that are going to replace Google, replace NSA, replace the Facebooks, the YouTubes, all those things. Luke's going to outline a bunch of the tips, the two first ones in the news business and the information business for y'all. And I want you to think about these because these platforms, like we say, they're defined as unstoppable, uncensored, universally beneficial, and they're a perfect blend of for private, profit, nonprofit, open source, decentralized, all working together. And I will come back after he's done and tell you a little bit about some advertising industry complete shift on its head, like I say, tied to the NSA, Google stuffs, media stuff, and economy. But Luke, what about news? Here's some good news, folks. Doesn't matter about Q, whether he's true or not. Let's get to work on some projects, some dreams that are bigger than going to the moon. Way bigger. We can all share, everybody with an internet connection.
Yeah, you know what? Anybody with a brain in their head wants to have their voice heard. And the platform that can be done on has to be free. Open source, with the tenets of its foundation, open to all to see, and it has to be followed. Why is it Google's been hijacked or was created by left-wing wackos? Facebook, left-wing wackos, Twitter, these people, how can they be running these platforms to our own detriment, to our own extinction if we allow it? It's so bad on Google. Information I could find 5 years ago, I can't even find anymore. It's not a search engine. It's an idea. It's an idea forced upon you. And so could you imagine an open source search algorithm that searches the keyword like it's supposed to, gives you the information? We'll have an open source, so you can see how we source things from first to last. And it's not going to be politically driven in any way, shape, or form. And any crappy idea can be posted up there. And then, of course, crappy ideas should be exposed, so we can expose them for what they are. Facebook, same thing. And there are some examples, and I think we'll put some links in there. Steam It, Minds. There are other platforms out there that are driving this agenda of free, open market source. And so these are the ideas that Chris and I have been working on, and we're going to be delivering to the world in such a way that you could talk and express, and we can have open debates and talk about these ideas. Because as anyone who understands history, if we can't talk these things out, no matter how opposing the ideas are, after talk doesn't work or isn't allowed, then what do you have? And no, I don't think people want violence in the street, because that's not a safe environment. By the way, when you wonder what goes on, can you pull up that meme with the United States third in murders throughout the world, so that the people can understand what I'm talking about here? I'm going to give you guys a little bit of an example, okay? All right, so take a look at this meme, and this is very important, okay? The United States is third in murders throughout the world if you remove Chicago, Detroit, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, and New Orleans. These 5 cities comprise over 90% of all the gun deaths in the United States. And these are Democrat-run cities, have been for decades, from the chief, the mayor, the governor, the school districts. They're all run by Democrats, and they have the strictest gun rules in the United States. So these are failed ideas, and if we can't see them for what they're worth, look at where the United States would be. 189 out of 193 countries if we remove those 5 cities. People will not move into a city and raise a family if they don't feel safe. Now, there's some people who could tolerate this, and if you look at what the population of these cities primarily are, you'll get a good example of what we're talking about. But if they want a safe city, then we're going to have to fight for it. So I want to leave everybody with this thought before I hand it over to Chris and wrap this up. Good ideas need to be expressed. Bad ideas need to be exposed, and there has to be a platform to do that. If Facebook is going to ban speech, what they call hate speech, if Google's going to constrict and monitor their search engines to run an agenda, then that's not going to happen. If we don't have a public square where all our ideas can be expressed, then what are we left with? And I don't think anybody's going to like the alternative. So Chris, why don't you wrap things up? You're on mute.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah, big stuff. I'm going to quickly just sum up that news business. I mean, Luke did a super job, I mean, of talking about free speech and the reasons why we need to have these discussions and the sort of big picture with Google and stuff. But let's drill into the dirty details a little bit and just, again, trying to suss out that news and information. And what are we talking about? Well, look, we know there's censorship. So what does uncensored mean? It means a platform you can go where there's all the news in the world, every single little piece of news in the world. And we can sort through it. We can have open discussions. They can't censor it. You've got an access to basically all the information, all the news, uncensored, plus the conversation. Now that's a global project, like I say, bigger than going to the moon, something that everybody with an internet connection can participate in. We can have tons of fun. We can all benefit. Now information, let's take it beyond the news, because let's face it, people don't go to university and study the news clippings, for goodness sakes. And so, you know, and even in academia, information itself has lots of categories, from history to art, you know, all kinds of things. And so if you go to Google and you type in the Google bar, and YouTube is the second most popular search bar on the web, right? But when you go to those search bars and you type in topics, imagine what the internet could really provide in terms of how long does it take before you get to the core issues between, you know, philosophy, economy, you know, math, science, whatever. There's so many disciplines, but they break down to these cores. And as the generalist and the, you know, how many of you internet users, these are just tools that we all want and need. A lot of these tools are actually already available. Go and look at Nexus. If you don't know what Nexus is, look at their product Lexus. Lexus. I can't remember. For the in this second, for the information and journalism and media industry, they were pioneering the journalism industry tech in 1978 when I was born. I'm 40 right now, right? And so those products that they create, we're talking about creating a lot of those same tools. These are already technologies and tools that are available on the web right now. All your information is bought and sold, you know, Google, Facebook, all this stuff. We're talking about creating these same tools, the power of the internet, unleashing it for you, giving you the information, the history. Imagine going to the web and being able to look up things and see the connections that they have to, you know, culture, art, music, economy. How does this interact with this? What are the core principles? What are the truths? What are the pros? What are the cons? Imagine the ways that we can talk about sorting the web. I remember seeing TED Talks like this about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, talking about that. So that's it, folks. We got lots of solutions more. We don't have time tonight to go into the economy or advertising industry, but there's a little bit about news and information to get your teeth wet. We got huge platforms, lots of exciting collaborative work to do with, and Luke said, connecting projects like Mind, Steam It, all of these people, not trying to supersede them, replace them, be the grand czar, trying to connect these nodes like they are into a grander project than Q. Think about it, folks. Pretty amazing stuff. And I'm going to pull up a modus as a good symbol of some of our work to close out the show. Wish you all well in the world, wherever time, date this happens to find you. Thank you for tuning in, and encourage you to go check out some of our other stuff about those projects. And certainly Luke's show is usually full of regular rants and great conversation on all the world's most important topics. So be sure to check out his episodes coming out this week.
Keep it free.